Then my younger sister stepped out from the hallway, arms crossed. Seriously? You had the nerve to show up on Thanksgiving? What if the neighbors saw you? This is so embarrassing. I took a deep breath, barely holding my smile together. I just came to drop off the pumpkin pie and say hi. Madison and Wesley were looking forward to seeing their grandparents. Lying to your kids now, huh? My father snapped. Just like their mother, these two won't grow up to be anything good. How could they, with a parent like you? And then, Madison's small voice trembled as she spoke. Mom works hard every day. She wakes up early and makes us lunch. Every single day. I quickly wrapped my arm around her shoulders. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back as she stared up at her grandfather. Mom is my hero. My father's face froze for a split second, then twisted into fury. Shut your mouth. No manners at all. Get out. Don't ever set foot here again. My mother and sister chimed in together. He's right. Just leave. Don't bring shame to this house again. I adjusted the kids' coats and clutched the pie, holding it tight. This time, I didn't respond. Not to my father's shouting, nor to the cold words from my mother and sister. I simply held my children's hands and said one word. All right. That was it. I didn't say another word. No more arguing. No tears. No anger. I left all of it at that front door. There was no one left to prove myself to. No one worth convincing. Only the warmth of Madison and Wesley's tiny hands guided me forward. They were my quiet pride, my strength. I walked down the steps slowly, and when I heard the door slam shut behind me, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I held Wesley's hand as he fought back tears, and gently placed my hand on Madison's trembling back. We got back in the car and buckled our seatbelts, but no one said a word. I started the engine and slowly drove through the quiet, early morning neighborhood. From the back seat, the kids sat silently, wrapped in their blankets, staring out the windows. The scent of pumpkin pie still lingered faintly in the air. As I drove, I checked on them through the rearview mirror. Madison was sitting still, her lips pressed tightly together, lost in thought. Wesley rubbed his sleepy eyes, occasionally glancing up at my face. Mom, why was Grandpa so mad? He asked softly. At 5 years old, he probably saw it all as just grown-ups fighting. But he was sensitive. He could feel how cold it had been. Maybe he was just sad about a lot of things, but instead of saying that, he got angry. That was the only way he knew how to show it. But Mom didn't do anything wrong, Madison whispered. At 8, she understood every word. She was hurt. She was angry, but she didn't cry. No, I didn't. I've always done my best to take care of myself and both of you. Some people see that, some don't. But what matters most is that I never forget it myself. We stopped at a traffic light. I looked at them again through the mirror. And Madison, Wesley, never let someone else's words define your worth. No matter what anyone says, you are amazing, just the way you are. They both nodded quietly. Madison reached over and gently took Wesley's hand. We merged onto the freeway. Within minutes, the bright blue waters of Miami came into view. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting a warm light over the white SUV's hood. The city was already wrapped in a festive holiday mood, with families, likely tourists, strolling leisurely along the sidewalks. Before long, I drove past rows of palm trees and pulled into the driveway of a bright white 2-story beach house. As I opened the front door and stepped into the living room, the view beyond the large windows revealed the wide, endless sea. Every day spent in this house felt like a page from a lifestyle magazine. Peaceful, beautiful, whole. We're home. The moment the door opened, the kids darted inside like they always did. Wesley jumped onto the couch and turned on the TV. Madison climbed up on the kitchen counter to peek into the fridge. Should we make hot chocolate? Yeah, I'll add the marshmallows. Listening to their voices, I reached for my apron and moved toward the stove, the stainless steel kitchen, the neatly set dining table, the artwork on the walls. All of it was built from scratch after I became a mother at 18. Back then, pushed forward by nothing but fear and loneliness, all I could do was keep moving ahead. At 18, I got pregnant. My partner then said he'd take responsibility, so I believed him and we got married. I was scared, but still hopeful that we could build a family together. But life wasn't that simple. Life quickly fell apart. Not long after I gave birth to our second child, he left, saying only, "I can't do this anymore." Soon after, divorce papers letters arrived, without a word. Just like that, I was thrown into the world as a single mother of two. In my parents' house, where reputation and appearances meant everything, my young marriage, early divorce, and life with two small children were seen as stains too shameful to bear, so they erased me. They stopped answering my calls. My name disappeared from the family group chat. I was quietly left off the guest list for every gathering. There was no one I could rely on, so I worked. For my kids, for our survival. I went door to door, looking for a full-time job I could manage with two toddlers. Eventually, I was hired at a small local real estate firm. At first, I just scheduled tours and made photocopies. At night, I studied for my real estate license after putting the kids to bed. On weekends, I cleaned vacant properties and did on-site inspections. By my second year, I'd become the top sales agent and used my bonus to buy a run-down duplex, 40 years old. I painted it myself, fixed the plumbing, and rented it out. The rent became the down payment for my next property. That cycle of sweat, grit, and reinvestment I repeated again and again. After I got licensed, local investors started trusting me. I built a one-stop service that handled everything: acquisition, renovation plans, and property management. I slowly built cash flow. Through refinancing, I pulled equity and kept going. By year 5, I owned 4 buildings. By year 8, I had 8 across Miami and Tampa. Trust from tenants led to more deals. I opened the black leather folder tucked into the corner of the room, revealing my latest asset report. Rows of colorful graphs and figures. The current market valuation, approximately $50 million. My children's education, my retirement savings, and even contingency plans for unforeseen risks. All of it was financially secured on paper. But the people from that house knew none of this, because I never told them. If I ever showed them how far I'd come, my father would probably say, "I misjudged you." But that's just another version of conditional love. What I've always wanted was not approval, but respect. Not once in that house was any of my life accepted at face value, so I chose to prove myself not with words, but with action and results. And now, in this quiet house filled with sea breeze and laughter, I can hold my head high and protect Madison and Wesley's smiles. That is enough for me. It's been exactly 1 month since the day my father yelled, "Get out!" at his front door. Christmas had passed, and the city's lights were slowly being taken down. A few scraps of wrapping paper still lingered in the corner of the living room, reminding me that the year was nearly over. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was my mother, her first message since that day. When I opened it, I found a surprisingly long text. "We lost the house, your father's investments. None of them worked out. It's being foreclosed. Please, I just want to talk for a bit." I furrowed my brow. Why now? A few days later, my sister sent a message too. The same sister who'd told me not to come, who had said I was a disgrace. Her profile photo on social media had changed. All she wrote was, "I know it's late, but I'm sorry," like she'd suddenly realized something. A strange feeling welled up in my chest, and then I understood. Turns out, my father had been struggling, desperate for money after losing everything. He'd started reaching out to old contacts for help. One of them mentioned a young woman doing well in real estate in Miami. That's when it clicked for him. He realized it was me, and he must have looked me up. I never tried to live in hiding, but I had kept my work, my assets, my entire life away from my family, because there was never a reason to share it. Eventually, a message came from my father too. "I've misjudged you all this time. I'm sorry. I'll be honest. We're in trouble. If there's any way you could help." I stared at my phone for a long time and didn't move. I never replied, neither to my mother, my sister, nor my father. People might say I was being cold, but I didn't care. The truth was, I no longer felt anger or sadness, not even hope. All that remained was one quiet truth. I've come too far to go back now. I had no desire to disrupt the peace I'd finally built. Still, the calls and messages kept coming, day after day, but I let them pass, all of them, because there was nothing left to return to. And because everything I needed to protect was already here. That alone was enough. The new year arrived, and winter break continued peacefully with the kids. Sunlight poured in through the windows as we sat around the table, enjoying a late breakfast and the kind of quiet only holidays bring. Madison was coloring at the table, and Wesley had spread blocks across the floor, deep in concentration, building something only he understood. I prepared lunch in the kitchen, smiling to myself as I listened to their chatter. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner of the living room, half decorated, ornaments rearranged by little hands. It was an ordinary morning, nothing special, but it was filled with something real, joy. That afternoon, the house was calm. The kids were in their rooms playing, and I had just finished washing the dishes when the doorbell rang. Wiping my hands absently, I walked over to the monitor and froze. Standing at my front door was my father. I gasped softly. He looked much thinner than I remembered. The harsh presence he once carried was gone. His shoulders sagged, his back hunched slightly. Gone were the sharp suits. He wore a faded gray shirt and worn jeans. His white hair was unkempt. His face was covered in stubble. There was mud on his shoes, and something about the way he stood seemed off, strained, uneasy. The exhaustion and desperation were written all over him. Silent and motionless, he no longer looked like the father I once knew. I stared at the screen for a while, uncertain whether I should open the door. Finally, while Madison and Wesley were still in the living room watching something on their tablets, I quietly opened the door. "Kelly!" He called my name. It had been years since I'd heard my name spoken like that, plain and direct. "I just want to talk, just for a moment." What could someone who called me scum possibly have to say? He didn't answer. Instead, he held out a paper bag. For Madison and Wesley, I thought, maybe I could bring them something warm. I didn't take it. I just stared at the bag. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said at last. "I ignored everything you ever said. I never once tried to see what you were doing, what you were building. I knew somehow that he meant it, every word. And yet, I felt a faint crack somewhere deep in my chest. Even so, I have no intention of forgiving you." I quietly closed the door. That night, after the kids had gone to sleep, I stood in the kitchen sipping cold tea. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. "Please, even a little support. We need your help." Before I could close the screen, another message popped up. From my father. "I'm sorry for showing up like that, but you know the situation. Please, can you help us financially for the family's sake?" I opened the message, and without hesitation I typed a short reply. "Didn't you say I was scum?" Then I hit send, and blocked every contact. As I placed the phone face down on the counter, I exhaled deeply. That was the moment I knew I had finally cut all ties. I don't believe that true strength means unconditionally accepting attention and words that only came after everything had already fallen apart. Maybe I needed to be pushed out that day because it made me strong enough to protect my children's joy. And now I understand clearly that the door to my life is mine to open, no one else's. Outside the window, the waves rolled gently under the night sky. Their rhythm felt like my own breath. When winter break ended and school resumed, our everyday life returned. I was at home in Miami, organizing files for an upcoming interview. This weekend, my real estate work was featured in Forbes. The article's theme, A Mother's Journey and the Rise of a Real Estate Mogul. The journalist had even called me a model of modern success. The shoot and interview had taken over half a day. Honestly, I still wasn't used to hearing people talk about me like that. As I sat in the quiet living room, after the kids had left for school, I looked back on the road I'd walked. Pregnant at 18, abandoned shortly after my second child was born, no one to rely on. Everything, absolutely everything, I had carried alone. The very first place I rented was a small 40-year-old apartment. The property was full of vacant units when I first acquired it. I worked tirelessly to renovate it, then used social media to advertise, specifically to women. A safe place, built by my own hands. That was how it all began. The Forbes article sparked a huge response within just one day of publication. A single mother, abandoned by her family, builds a $50 million real estate empire. A woman who preserved her dignity as a mother through isolation and prejudice. Social media flooded with messages from people saying, "I want to live like Kelly. She makes me believe I can try too." Even a regional TV station reached out about making a documentary. But what surprised me most was my family's reaction. A few days after the article went live, I was casually scrolling through social media when I froze. It was a post from my sister. I had blocked their numbers, but I hadn't blocked them on social platforms. There it was, a screenshot of my Forbes article with a caption that read, "This is my amazing sister." I stared at the screen for a while, realizing I felt nothing. They were proud of me now, when it was convenient for them, posting as if the past had never happened. No matter how they tried to dress it up now, the words spoken on Thanksgiving would never be erased. I quietly closed the app and set the phone down. After all the times they called me a disgrace and a burden, to suddenly act like family now, I was speechless. A few days later, a letter arrived at my home. The sender, my parents. Seeing their names on the envelope, I couldn't move at first. Should I open it or tear it up? After a moment of hesitation, I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting, my father's. The ink was faded, the words awkward, but the hesitation and regret were unmistakable. I read your article, I admit it. You far surpassed anything I imagined. I spent my life believing family should look a certain way, and because of that, I saw nothing. I was blind. For your children's sake, could we meet? I want to apologize. I'll never call you scum again. I folded the letter slowly and placed it on the table. Later, I wrote a short reply, just a few lines, but the meaning couldn't have been clearer. I forgive you, but you will not have access to our lives. We've built something real, apart from you, and we are living fully. After I mailed the letter, I let out a deep breath. No anger remained, no sadness either, only clarity. I no longer lived for anyone's approval. They could call me scum, ignore me, cast me out, and still, I had risen, and I would keep rising, with my eyes fixed forward, not to erase the past, nor to forget it, but to walk the path I chose, side by side with the people I loved, my children, and I would keep building this life, no one's permission required. And with that, I made a new decision. That night, Madison and Wesley finished their homework, then curled up beside me on the couch. Madison leaned against my shoulder and said, "Hey, Mom, my teacher saw you on the news." She said, "Your mom is really cool." "Yeah, everyone says you're amazing," Wesley added proudly. I laughed and pulled them into a hug. "Thank you. But you know what? You two, you're what I'm most proud of in the world." On the TV, a rerun of my Forbes interview was airing. The three of us sat side by side, smiling as we watched. Warmth, softness, laughter. This was the kind of family I had always dreamed of. Later that week, I received an invitation from the local women entrepreneurs community. They asked me to be a keynote speaker. "Would you be willing to speak about turning adversity into strength?" I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "I'd be honored. If my story can give someone else courage, I'll gladly share it." Being rejected by my family hadn't diminished my worth. If anything, surviving that rejection had shaped who I am. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine for the first time in a long time. The moon shone brightly outside, casting a soft light over the Miami coast. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I no longer lived to be accepted. I could move through this world exactly as I am, even without anyone's approval. This place, where I could laugh with my children, was everything to me. The breeze off the sea was shifting, carrying with it the scent of spring. The sky still held traces of winter, but in the air, something had already begun to change. I sat in my usual deck chair, watching steam curl up from my coffee mug as I opened my laptop. As always, my inbox was overflowing. Investment inquiries, media interviews, speaking requests from community organizations. I reviewed them one by one, prioritizing calmly and objectively, just as I always had. But then something stopped me. A name stood out. It was an email from my mother. The subject line read, "I just want to talk." This time, it wasn't a plea for help. Hesitantly, I opened the email and found quiet, direct words that surprised me. "I've read your message over and over these past few months. I forgive you, but I will not allow access." I've thought deeply about what that truly means. For so long, I let your father's presence make my choices for me. I gave up thinking for myself. But after seeing your strength, I want to change, slowly but truly. I want to apologize to Madison and Wesley too. I did nothing for them. I just want to talk, nothing more. Even if it's just a small corner of your life, I'd be grateful to be there again. I stared at the screen, unsure what to type in return. There was no anger anymore, no rejection, only a faint memory, like a distant voice from long ago. A few days later, I took Madison and Wesley to a park. We arranged to meet at the lake, the same spot we used to visit when I was a child. My mother said my father wouldn't come. That decision was hers. The afternoon sunlight was gentle. White petals floated on the wind. As we approached, I saw her sitting on a bench. She stood when she saw us, untangling her fingers from her lap. Her face tightened slightly as she rose. I held my children's hands, guiding them carefully along the path, avoiding the scattered petals. smiles. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice hoarse and barely steady. I swallowed the rising feeling in my chest and gave a quiet nod. Madison and Wesley looked uncertain, but they listened as my mother knelt down and began to speak. "A long time ago, I said terrible things to your mom. I've regretted that ever since. I wanted to meet you both. You're such wonderful children, and I see now how hard your mom has worked, how much she's done." Wesley stared at her for a moment before asking softly, "Are you not mad anymore?" "No, I'm not. I'm sorry." Madison looked at me, her eyes searching for an answer. I gave her a small nod. She gently reached out and touched my mother's hand. A small hand, soft as it brushed away something unseen. We spent about an hour there, quietly talking, mostly about practical things. After losing the house, my parents had moved into a small rental apartment in the suburbs with my sister. It was modest, quiet, and a far cry from their previous life. My father now worked at a local hardware store. My sister juggled part-time jobs, and my mother had taken a cleaning job. They were still struggling financially. Some debts had been settled, but there was no savings, no steady income for retirement. "Honestly, every month feels like a balancing act," she said with a tired smile. She also told me they'd started cognitive behavioral therapy. Her, my father, and my sister. They had weekly sessions where they worked on identifying patterns of anger, blame, and emotional avoidance. At first, my father had resisted, she said, but now he filled out the worksheets earnestly. My sister had even begun journaling to manage her emotions. Each of them was, in their own way, trying to look at their lives differently. Clutching her paper cup of coffee, my mother said quietly, her voice laced with a faint sigh, "It'll take time, but I really do want to change." I didn't say much. I simply nodded. But the way the soft spring light fell across her profile, it made me think she was finally looking forward instead of back. That was enough. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's not pretending things never happened. Maybe it's just quietly unfastening the chains of the past so you can move forward freely. On the way home, Madison whispered, Grandma's voice, it sounded a little soft. "Yeah, it did," I replied. Then Wesley chimed in, "Can we get ice cream?" And just like that, the car filled with laughter. At a red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror. I want their memories to be filled with warmth, not pain, not resentment, but truth, recovery, and care. We will never be dragged backward again. We won't return to that house, but maybe, just maybe, we can leave room for a letter if it's ever needed. That kind of distance. Maybe that's what reconciliation can look like. My life is finally back in my own hands. I am no longer someone's daughter. I am Madison and Wesley's mother, and as a woman named Kelly, I will continue to walk forward with pride.